Hello everybody, it's Avery, and welcome to my Week 2 coverage of Pika's Awesome Draft Week 3. Last week I fought against Matt, who was able to clutch an extremely close last mon situation against me. So, going into Week 2, I really wanted to win this to get the momentum back in my favor, and I was up against Sky. Now, Sky's team, one of the first things I noticed about it is that it didn't have a lot of speed. And that not having a lot of speed means that a lot of my Pokemon don't need to run a lot of speed because I don't really have anything to speed creep. So that was essentially like one of the biggest things in this matchup. The fact that I could get away with running more bulk and more attack, like with plus attack and plus special attack natures, than I could previously. But another thing with the team is that it has a lot of special takes. There are so many Pokemon that can just eat special hits so well that makes it kind of hard to just run a special breaker. And I need something more like a special setup Pokemon in order to actually be able to beat down Pokemon like Slowking or Clodsire. Going in, I wasn't entirely sure how I was going to approach things in this matchup, but I knew like the big threats that I had to take down. Threat number 1, Slowking Galar. With Regenerator and high special defense, Slowking is able to just tank hits forever, and that means that, like, for example, if I have a Terapagos, I can, like, end up using all of my Tera Starstorms just trying to 2-hit KO Slowking, which I can't do. And also, Slowking was a really big threat offensively to my team, especially if it has Focus Blast, because Focus Blast and Psyshock specifically shred almost the entirety of my team, and there's not a lot that I can do about that. And then you throw in status moves or like Toxic and Thunder Wave, and it becomes like really difficult to actually beat down Slowking. And then of course Mega Scizor. Mega Scizor is super strong, has access to Swords Dance and Priority, which can kind of circumvent the speed. And it's a big threat. Like, it got 5 kills in its first week, which is definitely formidable because, you know, I don't want to end up like that with my team. And then it also just has the ability to pivot around and stay like a passive threat because you don't know if it's going to Swords Dance or if it's just going to U-turn. So Mega Scizor, another massive threat. And the last one was Clodsire. Despite the fact that there weren't many good water resists on Sky's team, at least ones that could reliably break through Blastoise, Clodsire, with access to Water Absorb, makes it really hard for Blastoise to actually make progress. And it's a 50-50, because if I run Blastoise and Clodsire is unaware, that's very good for Blastoise. If I don't run Blastoise and I instead bring set up Terapagos and it's unaware, then unaware just completely stalls out Clodsire, and there's not much I can do about that. So it was really a 50-50, and combined with, again, just like Slowking, a surprisingly good offensive combination to my team, Clodsire was another really big threat. So, first mon I bring is Tornadus Therian, heavy duty boots, physically defensive again, just because I wanted to be able to tank a +2 Mega Scizor Bullet Punch from full. I am timid just to make sure that I outspeed Moltres, so I can always get the knockoff or the taunt off on it. I have Hurricane, knockoff, taunt, and defog. Taunt is to make sure that Pokemon can't recover easily. Knockoff makes Pokemon more susceptible to hazards, and hits Slowking surprisingly hard. Hurricane has a little bit better odds of killing an Araquanid than Bleakwind Storm does, so that's why I opted for the higher damage. And Defog so that I can just get rid of all of Clodsire's hazards, because Clodsire is the only real hazard setter on this team. So, no U-turn on this set was definitely a problem, but I realized that I needed the hazard control more than I needed the pivoting. Pokemon 2 is Bisharp. Bisharp is my ace in the hole against Slowking. I have the ability Pressure and a lot of investment into my defenses, and the idea is that that I can substitute on Slowking as they Focus Blast, and with Pressure they only get 4 Focus Blasts. So I can essentially use 4 substitutes to solve out 4 Focus Blasts, and then also spread status with Thunder Wave. Throat Chop is so that Sylveon can't Hyper Voice through my substitute if it's slower. Obviously, like a timid Sylveon will be able to do damage through the substitute, which is a threat. But I still wanted the ability to like not let things circumvent my substitute, just so that I could consume more power points from Pokemon. And my next Pokemon and my main win condition in this matchup was Terapagos. I have enough HP to set up 5 substitutes with this, just like leftovers, to further increase my opportunities to set up, because the more turns that my opponent spends trying to do defensive counterplay, the more I'm healing. I'm EV'd to outspeed a max speed Mega Scizor just to ensure that no funny business can happen with like a jolly close combat. I have Tera Starstorm because it's my strongest move by far. Flamethrower, which one-hit KOs Scizor almost always, unless it's max special defense. Substitute to avoid status moves from Pokemon like Slowking, and Calm Mind to boost my special defense against the myriad of special attackers. Now, in order to actually beat down Pokemon like Slowking and Clodsire that are a threat to my Terapagos' setup, I have Iron Hands. Instead of going with the Swords Dance set, I went with 4 attacks with a Booster Energy set. I'm EV'd to outspeed, I believe, 252 Adamant Araquanid and Little Speed Investment Sylveon. Just Adamant Nature, Close Combat, which almost OHKOs Rotom, Ice Punch, which OHKOs Hydrapple, Rock Slide, always one-hit KOs Moltres, like any Moltres, even max physical defense Moltres will get OHKO'd by Rock Slide, which is insane. And Fire Punch hits Scizor and just the entirety of her team very well, because there's no real Mon that wants to switch into Fire Punch that also is okay with taking a close combat. My next Pokemon was Shaman. Shaman seems a little weird here because Hydrapple, Moltres, and Slowking all eat hits from it forever, but Shaman was really important here because Shaman's like a perfect counter to Rotom Wash. You resist water and electric, take almost no damage from Signal Beam, and you can't be stuck with status for a long time because of Natural Cure. So Shaman plus Iron Hands is essentially my way of beating down Rotom Wash always, because if it was something like a Trick Choice Scarf set, that could easily sabotage my Terapagos trying to set up. So, I have Leaf Storm with an Eject Pack, the idea being that I can lead this Pokemon against like an Araquanid, for example, Leaf Storm, burn my item, and then go into Tornadus, and then Tornadus can finish off Araquanid. But then, also, once I consume that Eject Pack, I can bait in something like a Moltres or a Slowking and use Covet to steal their item. Essentially like a second knockoff that's a little bit harder to use. I have Baton Pass, which lets me consistently pivot without having to burn my Eject Pack against Pokemon that I don't want to burn it against, and Healing Wish. Healing Wish lets me heal up a Terapagos that's already been chipped trying to set up once before, or a Bisharp if I have more PP stalling to do against a Pokemon like Slowking, and Bisharp ends up taking too much damage. And my final Pokemon is a Babiri Screamtail with a lot of physical defense investment. The idea here is that I can still take hits from Scizor, since plus 2 Bullet Punch only does about 30 to 40%. Screamtail was essentially a glue Pokemon that I could use to force my opponent into certain things. Like if she wants to run a Scarf Moltres, then I'm setting up Stealth Rocks, which means that you have to burn that Tera in so that you don't take that rocks damage and just lose 50% of your Moltres immediately, since that's your speed control on the team. I also have Thunder Wave, which I can use to sabotage Pokemon like Scizor, which opens up Iron Hands more, since Iron Hands will always be faster than a paralyzed Scizor, even if Scizor sets up a Trailblaze. I have Psychic Noise to prevent Pokemon like Clodsire from healing, and I have Encore to prevent Pokemon like Sylveon from setting up Calm Minds, which can be a big threat for my team, especially since my Bisharp doesn't have a Steel move. So yeah, and that's my team going into week 2, and I'm really excited to show y'all the match. So, Immediately, the things I noticed on Team Preview is no Clodsire, which is absolutely massive for my Terapagos. That means that if I can find the right opportunity, like if I paralyze Scizor, just spread paralysis, get hazards up, or just stall out Slowking's Focus Blasts, then Terapagos can just destroy this entire team. But also I noticed that there isn't really anything that serves as an immediate threat to my Tornadus. So I decided to just lead off with Tornadus, just because that Pokemon is free into just about anything and can click Knockoff. I clicked Taunt here against Wigglytuff because I know that Wigglytuff is one of the Mons on her team that can set up Stealth Rock. Instead, Wigglytuff is revealed to be Thunder Wave, which is very important information because that tells me this Wigglytuff is trying to essentially be speed control for this team. So, seeing that there is no flying resist on her team, I just go right for the Hurricane, which does a good chunk to Slowking, and Slowking is like the perfect target here for knockoff. Just remove those leftovers and limit Slowking's options. Eerie Spell comes out. That's not a move that you see very often. I have tried it once before in VGC. I think it wasn't very good. But that is a little bit of a threat, because if I Tera Starstorm into Slowking, and Slowking uses Eerie Spell, then I've just lost 4 Tera Starstorms, which is essentially like using Tera Starstorm twice into a pressure Pokemon, which is extremely bad. So, I just go hard into Bisharp, expecting another Eerie Spell. Instead, Slowking sets up Slack Off. And I go to set up my first substitute in case of a Focus Blast, because yes, I could have pursued this Slowking if I knew it was going to switch out, but also I didn't want to take the risk of it being just Focus Blast and just tanking the pursuit and killing my Bisharp immediately, because Healing Wish is not Revival Blessing, so I'd rather lose 24% of my Bisharp's health than the entirety of my Bisharp. But Moltres comes out, which means that it's a free Thunder Wave. Scorching Sands comes out from Moltres, which is something that I did expect because my Iron Moth does kind of click fire moves for free. As you can see, I don't have Iron Moth. I instead opted for Terra Fire Iron Hands because Iron Moth really struggled with Clodsire unless I could get like an Acid Spray off beforehand, which is really hard to do against her team. So I go for another substitute here, and Moltres reveals Scarf here, because the only way that a paralyzed Moltres can outspeed my Bisharp is if it's Choice Scarf. So despite the fact that my Bisharp is at 3%, the fact that Slowking switched out on Bisharp, and the fact that Moltres revealed Scarf gave me a lot of information as I just go into Tornadus to completely blank the ground move that I know it's locked into. I go for Hurricane this turn because yet again there is no flying resist on her team. I do miss, but that's par for the course with Hurricane. I just go for Knockoff here against Dottler because Eviolite is the only thing that makes this mon like passable, as it just sets up a Future Sight. I was a little bit worried about a Terra Steel infestation because my Tornadus doesn't have U-turn, but instead she just opts to set up the Future Sight and let Dottler go down. Sylveon comes in here. I thought it was going to Calm Mind. Instead, it reveals that it's Choice Scarf with Hyper Voice, as my taunt does effectively nothing. Future Sight does do a bit of damage, but I'm able to regenerate some of that off. Realizing my opportunity here, I go to sack Bisharp since I don't think this Slowking has Focus Blast, and I go into my Terapagos. Because of Terra Shell, Hyper Voice doesn't do a lot of damage, but I still think this was kind of not the best opportunity to set up here with my Terapagos. I think it would have been better if I went into Scream Tail and clicked Thunder Wave, or if I went into Iron Hands and clicked Thunder Punch, because despite the fact that I have the Terra Shell, the fact that Hyper Voice pops my Terra Shell before I Calm Mind means that the initial Hyper Voice is actually doing a lot of damage still. So I set up a Calm Mind here, and knowing that the Sylveon is probably offensively oriented, I just go for the Tera Starstorm to try and 2-hit KO it. And whoa, Tera Starstorm got an animation. Oh my god. When did that happen? Before it was just kind of like a lunge. Oh my god, that's sick. they gave it an animation. I didn't. Yeah. Wigglytuff comes in here on my Terapagos' Tera Starstorm, and I know that this Mon can't do anything to a +1 special defense Terapagos, so I go for Substitute, because I know from turn 1 that this Wigglytuff has Thunder Wave, and that's probably what my opponent's going to try to go for. So, after we both heal up a little bit with leftovers, I set up a Substitute, as Thunder Wave completely fails, which immediately puts me in an extremely advantageous scenario. The only thing that could be scary is if I Calm Mind as she switches to Sylveon, and then Hyper Voice crits me the next turn. I go for Tera Starstorm again this next turn, and I just immediately knock out Wigglytuff. The thing about Sylveon that still makes it scary is that Hyper Voice can go through my Substitute, which means that I am vulnerable to crits more so than I would be behind a Substitute. So Sylveon is definitely the biggest threat, but instead, just thinking that I only have Tera Starstorm, or just don't have the coverage to kill Scizor, she goes into Scizor. Mega Evolve does not save this Mon from a quad effective +1 Terapagos Flamethrower, and from this point, I am in such an advantageous situation that I've essentially won the game. Not necessarily with Terapagos, because there's obviously still the Sylveon there that can be a threat, but with Iron Hand, since Terra Fire means that I just do too much damage to every single Mon on that team. So Slowking comes out here, and I don't want to Tera Starstorm here and get Eerie Spelled, because that would leave me with barely enough Tera Starstorms to actually kill all the Pokemon on the team, and I don't want to end up getting walled by Moltres. So instead I just set up a Calm Mind here as Eerie Spell. I had no idea this was a sound move. Goes through my Substitute and reduces the PP of Calm Mind, which is completely fine since I have more than enough Calm Minds. And I go for Calm Mind again because I'm not trying to waste my Tera Starstorms. And then Slowking reveals Calm Mind of its own, and I realize that I just have to nip it in the bud right here, and that 3 Calm Minds is going to have to be enough. Tera Starstorm, 120 base power, still does so much damage to Slowking as Slowking attempts to set up another Calm Mind. Instead of going Calm Mind for Calm Mind, I just 2-hit KO it with Tera Starstorm, which means that I have more than enough Tera Starstorms to close out this game. Moltres comes out, but even though it's Scarf, it's paralyzed, and I'm a +3 Terapagos. Tera Starstorm completely nukes it, and all that's left is Sylveon, and as you can see, the leftovers brought me to full HP, so even behind the Substitute, crit doesn't matter because I have that Tera Shell to resist it, and Tera Starstorm finishes it off with a 5-0 victory and 5 kills for Terapagos. This is an absolutely huge way to bounce back in this league, because luckily my first match was like a small loss, so it wasn't like I'm trying to claw back my differential, but this instantly puts me to like really good differential. So that's like really good, like momentum wise, and I'm hoping that in the future I can like continue to keep pushing my diff higher and higher. I think that I definitely pulled the trigger a little early with Terapagos. I was definitely feeling a little bit antsy when Sylveon revealed Scarf. Though I honestly think that I was fine, because if I found a single opportunity to set up Healing Wish with Shaman, then Terapagos just comes right back. Because if Sylveon continues to Hyper Voice here against my Terapagos, I do win the 1v1, barring a crit, but I am brought into range of Scizor's Bullet Punch. So what I can do instead is go into Shaman, click Healing Wish. If Scizor wants to click Swords Dance or something, I can go into Iron Hands, and then when the time is right, I can use that stored Healing Wish to bring back Terapagos and go for a sweep again. So yeah, I think that I definitely brought the right thing for this matchup. There was no Clodsire, which definitely made it a bit easier to navigate. But yeah, that's about all I have for this week. So thank you for watching, and peace.